we're going to rank the most evil kids in history, from evil to absolutely sadistic. Number 1, Joshua Phillips, 14 years. Josh Phillips seemed like a normal 14-year-old who grew up in Pennsylvania before moving to Florida with his mom to escape his drug-addicted dad. Neighbors described the quiet, friendly boy as someone you'd never suspect of harming a butterfly. Even the mom of his victim, Maddie Clifton, thought the two were longtime friends anytime she saw them hanging out. Teachers saw a popular kid who didn't cause trouble or have a criminal record. No one could fathom the darkness brewing inside. On November 3rd, 1998, Phillips was home alone when Maddie came over to play baseball. Though he knew better, Phillips agreed despite his parents' rules. That's when Phillips claims he accidentally struck Maddie's eye, causing her to bleed and scream. Fearing his dad's wrath, the boy snapped. Phillips dragged the injured Maddie inside, and to muffle her cries, he bashed her head with a baseball bat before stashing under his bed. When his dad got home, Phillips calmly chatted with him before returning to his grisly secret. Maddie was still alive. What would he do? There was no turning back now. Removing the mattress, the depraved boy stabbed his friend 7 times, taking her life. Her disappearance launched a desperate 6-day search. The sickest part is that Phillips himself took part in the search. I'm sure at some point he was like, "Hey guys, I think I saw something here." "Oh no, it was just a squirrel." What a psycho. At the end of the day, it was his own mother who ultimately found Maddie's body rotting in his room. Prosecutors had issues with Phillips' story. No dirt on Maddie's clothes from being dragged, no blood on the bat or outside. His stark lack of evidence made the already horrific crime feel more calculated. We may never know what truly triggered Josh's depravity that day. This is a soft reminder that some of the worst monsters walk among us wearing the masks of innocent children. In 1999, Joshua Phillips was convicted of first-degree homicide and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Number 2, Jesse Pomeroy, the boy torturer, 12 years. Jesse Pomeroy was one of America's earliest known career homicide specialists, and he was just a little child. He was notorious for his crimes committed in the late 19th century. Back in the 19th century, when everyone was getting distracted on cheap alcohol and endless wars, Jesse Pomeroy slashed his way into becoming the much-hated boy torturer. He was a child attacker who still shocks me, even after knowing his story for so many years. Born in 1859 in Charlestown, Massachusetts, Pomeroy endured a hellish childhood. Abused by his father, he displayed worrying cruelty from an early age, hammering poor little animals in alarmingly creative ways. Trust me, you do not want the details. It's much like that kid from Toy Story, except 1,000 times more sadistic. A former neighbor said that even as a little kid, the coldness in his eyes just didn't look right. Pomeroy's brutality soon turned toward children. In 1871, at just 12 years old, he lured a younger boy into isolation and attacked him with a knife, nearly taking his life. Over the next 2 years, a spree of assaults and sickening mutilations of boys in Boston followed. With each attack, the savagery escalated as the boy torturer lived up to his name. He was Satan incarnate, a child predator of the worst kind. 1874 saw Pomeroy's arrest for attacking and taking the life of 4-year-old Horace Millen. Though just 14, he received a life sentence, the maximum allowed for his age. Pomeroy was initially sent to reform school, but that was like trying to put the Incredible Hulk in a birdcage. He was soon transferred to the Massachusetts State Prison, where his disturbing behavior continued behind bars for decades. Despite pleas for clemency over the years, Pomeroy remained locked away until his death. Perhaps the most disturbing aspect about all this was how he seemed in person. A prison guard once reflected, "That Pomeroy kid was the coldest SOB I ever laid eyes on." If evil could take human form, it manifested as Jesse Pomeroy. Or maybe he actually died as a kid and was a ghost roaming that area, taking over his body to seek revenge. Hey, it's not that far-fetched. Number 3, Edmund Kemper, 15 years. This celebrity homicide specialist started his career from a very young age. From destroying valuables to attacking and taking the life of pets, Kemper's darkness escalated early. Yet the 15-year-old managed to convince psychologists that he was stable, despite being responsible for the death of his grandparents after an argument. Let's set the scene. He was born on December 18, 1948, in Burbank, California. When he was just 15 years old, he did something really terrible. It happened on August 27, 1964. Kier was at home, sitting with his grandma at the kitchen table. They started arguing, and Kier got really angry. He stormed off and grabbed his hunting rifle that his grandpa had given him. And when he went back to the kitchen, he shot his grandma once in the face and 2 more times in the back. Later, when his grandpa came back from grocery shopping, Kier shot him in the face in the driveway. After that, he didn't know what to do, so he called his mom. She told him to call the police, which he did. He waited for the police to come and arrest him. When he was taken into custody, he shockingly said that he just wanted to know what it felt like to attack his grandma. Kier was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia and was sent to a special hospital for people who are mentally ill and commit crimes. He only stayed there for 5 years. Incredibly, Kemper only served 5 years before being released in 1969. A grave misjudgment, as it unleashed him to hunt down 6 female co-eds, his own mother and her friend 3 years later. After the first 2, you'd think the state would lock him up for good. Maybe rehab never really fixes anybody, right? Number 4, Mary Bell, 11 years. Mary Bell's name still sends people into hysteria down in England. If you're from the UK, you're probably shaking in your boots right now, so sorry about that. What could she have done to get such a bad rap, even among the Brits? No shade. At just 11 years old, Bell forced her way into Britain's eternal memory. Born in 1957 in Newcastle, Bell's start was nightmarish. Her mother Betty worked in the adult industry battling mental illness. She subjected young Mary to neglect, violence, and predatory abuse. A former family friend claimed that the poor girl never had a chance at a normal childhood. The main horrors played out on May 25th of 1968, one day before her 11th birthday. She strangled 4-year-old Martin Brown in an abandoned Newcastle house. Initially, his death seemed accidental, until the full story came out months later, with all the horrible details left intact. 2 months later, alongside her friend Norma Joyce Bell, no relation, Mary lured 3-year-old Brian Howe to a field and used her bare hands to finish him off. Using scissors, she damaged his lifeless body. Seemed as though she'd gotten some kind of twisted enjoyment from it. Both Bells were arrested, but Mary's deeds raised even darker questions. Mary was soon convicted of manslaughter, pleading diminished responsibility. She received an indefinite sentence in detention, first in youth custody, then psychiatric treatment. Upon release in 1980 at age 23, Mary received a new identity and lifelong anonymity, even though most of the public wanted her gone for good. She's since lived under the radar. Her current life is a mystery. Some crimes are so evil that you literally have to disappear from the earth to live it down. In summary, Mary Bell's attacking spree reminds us that, sadly, some children should just be belled away for good. Or is that too dark? Don't worry, I'll show myself out. Number 5. Brian and David Freeman, 16 and 18, respectively. The Freeman brothers. 2 kids that got so bored with country life they decided to take things into their own hands. And by things, I mean the lives of 3 people. The Freeman family massacre still haunts the town where it took place. The Freeman family tragedy was a powder keg waiting to explode. Friends reveal their mother, Brenda Freeman, lived in constant fear of her sons Brian and David. The brother had embraced shaving their heads, donning military garb, and even getting revolting tattoos like Berserker and Sieg Heil scrawled across their faces. Desperate, Brenda sought help with the local police, but the hateful seeds had just taken root too deep. Brian had already been hospitalized for mental illness, and David had been in and out of juvenile facilities and substance abuse programs. The writing was on the wall. And soon, their hatred finally boiled over into violence. On February 26, 1995, teenagers Brian Freeman, David Freeman, and their cousin Nelson Ben Birdwell III executed one of the most chilling families in recent memory. Fresh from a movie night, the trio returned to the Freeman house on Erritz Lane. When 48-year-old Brenda Freeman argued about Birdwell's presence, her 17-year-old son Brian exploded. He grabbed her and shoved a pair of shorts into her mouth to muffle her screams. Then, he picked up a kitchen knife and finished the job. It was said that she was stabbed 16 times. But the horror wasn't over. David and Birdwell crept upstairs to the bedroom of their father, 50-year-old Dennis Freeman, and attacked him with a metal bar and a baseball bat as he slept. Nearby, their brother, 11-year-old Eric, was fast asleep, not knowing the danger he was in. The poor child's life was lost. Armed with a shotgun, the remorseless trio fled in Brenda's Pontiac. They were calmer than seasoned criminals, absolutely soulless. The Freeman massacre will forever mar the town's history, a nightmarish reminder that sometimes the most twisted dangers come not from strangers, but from your family next door. The grisly scene was discovered by Dennis's sister, Valerie Freeman, the day after the bloodbath. Coroners in Allentown described the attacks as one of the most brutal attacks that they'd ever witnessed. DA Bob Steinberg confessed that the level of savagery was unfathomable. Dennis and little Eric's faces were beaten to the point of being unrecognizable. The monstrous Freeman brothers fled to Michigan, finding refuge with skinhead pal Frank Hesse, a man they'd bonded with over a shared hatred at a neo-Nazi concert on New Year's Eve. 3 days later, the sadistic trio's run ended with their arrests. To avoid execution, Brian pled guilty to butchering his mom Brenda, while David confessed to attacking the dad, Dennis. Their cousin Birdwell was convicted of Dennis's attack after DNA matched the victim's blood on his shirt. Shockingly, no one was held accountable for little Eric's homicide. All three were spared the death penalty, instead receiving life sentences with no parole. In the end, the Freeman family case was an ultimate quest for a purified family tree, achieved by burning it to the ground themselves. Number 6. John Venables and Robert Thompson, 10 years old each. Child-on-child violence, torture, kidnapping, just a few of the crimes Venables and Thompson committed in a day. In 1993, the 10-year-old boys committed an evil act heard round the globe. They dipped their hands into the devil's cooking pot by torturing and attacking 2-year-old James Bulger. Both lads came from troubled backgrounds, marked by social troubles and family woes, so it isn't much of a surprise that they decided to express their frustration. The real surprise, however, is how they did it. Trust me, you've only ever heard a few stories this twisted. On February 12, 1993, they snatched little James from a Liverpool shopping center while his mom's back was turned very briefly. What followed was a nightmare. Thompson and Venables took Bulger to the Leeds and Liverpool Canal. There, they dropped him on his head, and he got hurt on his face. They joked about pushing Bulger into the canal. Next, the boys walked across Liverpool, and about 38 people saw them. 2 people asked Thompson and Venables questions, but they said that Bulger was lost and they were just taking him to the police. Later, the boys went to Walton. They kicked him, stomped on him, and threw bricks and stones at him. They put batteries in Bulger's mouth. Finally, they dropped a heavy railway piece on Bulger, causing him to have 10 skull fractures. The doctor said Bulger had so many injuries, 42 in total, that they couldn't actually tell which one took his life. Thompson and Venables put Bulger on railway tracks and then put rocks on his head, hoping a train would hit him. After they left, the train cut Bulger's body in half. Some kids found his body 2 days later. During their 1993 trial, a psychologist assessed them as extremely hardened, remorseless individuals. Found guilty, they made history as Britain's youngest convicted attackers. Given their ages, they received indefinite sentences at Her Majesty's pleasure. First in secure juvenile units. But their controversial release on lifelong anonymity in 2001, after just 8 years, ignited public fury. Since then, Venables has proven rehabilitation remains a pipe dream, reoffending repeatedly with arrests for child abuse images and other crimes. His partner Thompson has managed to stay under the radar. These attackers should have a movie based on them or something. It's so hard to imagine that that kind of evil can exist in 10-year-old minds. What were you thinking about at 10 years old? Ice cream and rainbows? Or, well, I guess in this day and age, video games, having an iPhone, stuff like that, right? This doesn't mean that you should start suspecting that your 10-year-old is trying to murder you or murder innocent children, but you probably should watch out, though. Number 7. Lori Tacket and Melinda Loveless, 17 and 16 years respectively. Man, these 2 girls were just... Evil isn't a good enough word. I mean, but what would you expect when one of these kids is literally named Loveless? Lori Tacket, born October 5th, 1974, was a hellraiser. Growing up as a teenager in Madison, Indiana, Tacket became involved with a group of girls, including Melinda Loveless, who were known for their rebellious behavior and involvement in the occult. Melinda Loveless, born on October 28, 1975 in New Albany, Indiana, had experienced a tough youth, characterized by familial issues and instability. Loveless had intense feelings of jealousy and resentment, particularly towards Shanda Scherer. who Loveless saw as her #1 romantic rival. It was like all those one-sided love affairs between you and your high school crushes. Or more specifically, like that time that you wished your crush's partner could just disappear. Except this time, you decided to do something about it. Loveless would be the one making the disappearances happen. On the night of January 10, 1992, Tacket, Loveless, and 2 other teenage girls, Toni Lawrence and Hope Rippey, lured Shanda Scherer into a car under false pretenses. They then drove her to a remote area where they subjected her to hours of violence, including beating, stabbing, and ultimately setting her ablaze. The motive behind the attack stemmed from Loveless's jealousy over Scherer's relationship with a girl named Amanda Hirvin. In 1993, Tacket, Loveless, and Lawrence were tried as adults and they were found guilty. They were each subjected to lengthy prison terms. Rippey, who cooperated with authorities and testified against her colleagues in this evil act, received a lighter sentence. Since their incarceration, Tacket and Loveless have both expressed remorse for their actions. Tacket tried to go to school, prison. In fact, she even got a college degree. Beautiful things can always happen, so this is a sign not to give up yet. Loveless has also confessed that she regrets orchestrating the homicide of Scherer. Shanda Scherer's case is still remembered as a core homicide that shocked Americans right to the bone marrow, and that is a very rare thing. I mean, we know how violent America can be. They do love their guns, hee-haw, boy howdy. But, you know, that's what happens when the ugly gets out, when jealousy, peer pressure, and unchecked cruelty among teenagers is left unattended. It means trouble. Number 8, Willie Bosket, 15 years. Willie Bosket is a notorious figure in the realm of criminal justice in the U.S. He's basically like the next-door neighbor at some point, and he was the kind to have late-night parties and leave the door unlocked. Born on December 9th in 1962 in Harlem, New York City, Bosket's early life was marked by poverty, neglect, and exposure to violence. Bosket's criminal history began at a very young age. By the time he was 15, he had already committed a series of violent crimes, including armed robbery and assault. However, his most infamous crime occurred on March 5th of 1978, when he attacked 2 people on a New York City subway platform. The victims, Noel Perez and his 45-year-old mother Anna Maria Angel, were both stabbed to death in an attack that is going to leave you wondering if the heavens have forsaken this world. Bosket later confessed to committing more than 2,000 crimes between the ages of 9 to 15, including 25 stabbings. In response to Bosket's actions, New York State passed the Bosket laws, which allowed for harsher penalties, including longer sentences and the possibility of trying juveniles as adults for certain crimes. It's crazy to think that he was so perverse and so worthless and scummy of a human being that he made the entire city reconsider their laws. In the old days, he might have been Julius Caesar's boss. Doubtful. It would have been any kind of important person. Anyways, following his arrest and conviction for the subway attacks, Bosket was sentenced to a maximum security prison in New York State. Despite numerous attempts at rehabilitation and interventions, he continued to exhibit violent and antisocial behavior while incarcerated. He's the state's most violent inmate by far. Because he's known as the bad boy of the prison, he's kept in a specifically designed cell, which is completely empty. Why is that? They removed everything, including the light bulbs, to stop him from swallowing them, as he's done in the past. To make matters worse, not even the guards watching him can talk to him. Here are his own words. Blah, blah, blah. I laugh at this system because there ain't a damn thing it can do to me except to deal with the monster it's created. Chills. Bosket's case makes me seriously doubt children don't know what they're doing. It also makes me doubt how effective those rehab programs are. Have they ever actually fixed anyone? I mean, I'm genuinely, let me know if you have any stories in the comments. I have some really big questions about the U.S. criminal justice system and how they handle human nature. Are the scouts responsible for creating this monster, or did his rage and thirst for violence come from his childhood on West 114th Street in Harlem? Or was he destined to follow the path of a father he had never met, who had a very weirdly similar early life of crime? His case was also a booster for much-needed changes in sentencing laws and the treatment of juvenile offenders in the U.S. Willie Bosket remains locked up as he should be in New York State. He's serving multiple life sentences for his crimes, and while that's not enough, to be honest, his case continues to be studied and discussed by policymakers, scholars, and advocates for criminal justice reform. Number 9. Morgan Geyser and Anna Wier, 12 years each. These two gained national attention for their involvement in the Slender Man stabbing case, which I'm sure you've heard of, a disturbing incident that occurred in Waukesha, Wisconsin in 2014. Geyser and Anna Wier were both 12 years old at the time of the crime. Rhyme intended. The two girls were friends and classmates who had become obsessed with the fictional character Slender Man, an internet meme of a tall, thin figure with a featureless face who's said to stalk and traumatize individuals, especially children. On May 31st, 2014, Geyser and Wier lured their friend Peyton Leutner, also 12, into the woods during a sleepover. There, they brutally stabbed Leutner multiple times with a knife, intending to impress and appease Slender Man. Miraculously, Leutner survived the attack, crawling out of the woods to seek help despite her injuries. Following their arrest, Geyser and Wier were charged as adults with attempted first-degree intentional homicide. The case garnered widespread media attention, and it sparked debates about the influence of internet culture on young people and the mental health issues underlying their actions. In subsequent interviews and court proceedings, it became clear that both Geyser and Wier struggled with mental health issues and have been having difficulty distinguishing reality and fantasy. They believed that by carrying out the attack, they would become proxies for Slender Man and protect themselves from their families from his wrath. In December 2017, Geyser pleaded guilty to attempted first-degree intentional homicide, but was found not guilty by reason of mental disease or defect. She was subsequently sentenced to 40 years in a mental health facility. Wier also pleaded guilty to a lesser charge of attempted second-degree intentional homicide, but was similarly found not guilty by reason of mental disease or defect. She was sentenced to 25 years in a mental health facility. Just to check, when last did you hear whispers from the Slender Man? Number 10. Alyssa Bustamante. Bustamante was just 15 years old when she lured her 9-year-old neighbor Elizabeth Olten into the woods and brutally attacked her. This level of violence perpetrated by a juvenile shocked many people. Alyssa Bustamante gained fame for the Missouri crime in 2009. Born on January 28th of 1994, Bustamante grew up around violence. She grew up around betrayal. She struggled with mental health issues from a very young age, and that includes depression and suicidal thoughts. On October 21st, 2009, Bustamante, then 15, lured Elizabeth Olten into the woods under the guise of wanting to play. Once they were alone, Bustamante attacked Olten, strangling her, stabbing her multiple times, and slitting her throat. After the brutal attack, Bustamante buried Olten's body in a shallow grave. Following her unrest, she confessed to the evil act, providing chilling details of the assault, of the murder. In 2012, Bustamante pleaded guilty to second-degree homicide and armed criminal action. During her sentencing hearing, evidence of her troubled upbringing and mental health issues were presented. The judge sentenced her to life in prison with the possibility of parole, making her eligible for parole after serving 35 years. The case of Alyssa Bustamante raised questions about the intersection of mental illness and criminal behavior, as well as the adequacy of mental health resources for troubled youths. It also underscored the devastating impact of violence on communities and the importance of early intervention and support for individuals struggling with mental health issues. The fact that she buried Olten's body in a shallow grave after the evil act added another layer of horror to the crime, right? I mean, that's one hardcore teenager, wouldn't you say? Anyways, on that fun note, that is the end of today's episode. As always, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends who like child murder. Woo! Okay, alright, maybe not that. See you next time, guys.